Good evening. It's Shawnee Shea, and we're going to go over week 4, and I am making some connections. So I started here with how do we know who is smart? And I really like the way that some of the readings kind of talked about the beginning of intelligence and some of the reasons that we even thought to think about trying to gauge someone's intelligence, and then also about how the testing of intelligence was developed around the same time that science and like research methods and scientific methods really started to take off in society. And for me, that was really important because it spoke to like our understandings of what we see as intelligent, and also the cultural bias that really is inherent in intelligence. I use the word smart, right? And so even that, me identifying smart as intelligence, just speaks to how I perceive intelligence and what is even my terminology and wording for it. So how do we know who is smart? And then for me, that brought up the question that I feel like we talked about: what is smart? And once again, therein lies the cultural biases. And so I'm actually going to take you down the first path. How do we define smart? And here I focus on the intelligence test. And once again, the really, really large cultural bias and white supremacist bias that came from how we even started to understand what intelligence was. And so what is intelligence and what is a test? And one of the articles really went over this and kind of broke it down in terms of how we decided what a test would be and how we decided what intelligence was. And once again, both of those things are so biased, based on the society we live in. Even the idea of a test, right, of giving someone a one time or even multiple times to prove that they know something, as if their everyday life and everyday actions doesn't prove what they know. Or the way that they be, I should say, is not more of, doesn't show more of like what they know. And so from here I have, can we test intelligence, right? The question that I think arose and really promoted the intelligence test. I'm not going to say promoted the intelligence test, but what was the ostensible reason for intelligence test. And one test for everyone, how does that work? And for me, I think when we even think of it that way, right, like one shoe doesn't fit everyone, it becomes really obvious. And so, of course, anytime something is really obvious for me, I get really nervous and I go, well, there must be some underlying cause that we would work against what's obvious. And when the data shows that testing is I would say a high stakes test, and high stakes decision making based on those tests is contradictory to the success of students. I think that as for me, as a human being and as someone in education and academia, that it really alarms me, because we know it doesn't work, but we continue to do it. So it won't work. So why do we use test scores for high ranking decisions? And here we'll go on to, it's probably a white supremacist tactic. And I say that because it doesn't make sense. And also because, if I mentioned this, I think in one of my first slide presentations, when I posted a picture of a small Caucasian child sitting on a dark-skinned slave, and I said, would this Caucasian child be able to walk in the shoes of this slave? And it was something to that effect. And I say that because I will just remind everyone that, if I was to give someone a test based upon my cultural and lived experience, they may not be able to pass it just because they haven't lived through my experiences. It's like asking someone, how do you go through the bail process, and they've never been to jail, and then telling them that they're not intelligent because they're not aware of the process, they don't know it, or they can't pretty much spit that information out to you. So going on, since I mentioned that it's probably a white supremacist tactic, the test and the tracking are the tactics. And the tests actually have become tools to track students, right? The white supremacist oppressive tests have become a tool used to track, and tracking has become a tool for white supremacy. And so here you see the arrows kind of leading into not each other, but into a type of cycle. And from tracking, we have what we've already discussed, among many other things. But you have jail, right, which is for Black people, and you have success, which is here for white people. And we can see how the idea of intelligence testing leads into this idea that one group is set for success and one group is set for jail, and it gives this type of rationalization for that type of behavior in institutions and for our own moral thought. And so back up to how do we know who is smart? And so just in the question, what is smart, I just led into what makes sense, right? In terms of education. So I have here less tracking, more funding, more teacher support, and varied curriculum. And I will say there's many other things, but those were the things that really stuck out to me, especially varied curriculum, because I've seen it work really well for people, all different students. And in my belief, a varied classroom and a varied curriculum really does allow for students to rise to their best student, because it just gives them an opportunity to express themselves more wholly. Because when you ask someone to, check off the right box, it essentially says that if they don't know the right box, then they themselves are invalidated. And that's really difficult when you're trying to get someone to learn a new concept or grapple with something they don't understand. And so all of these things, less tracking, more funding, more teacher support, and varied curriculum, for me, dismantle white supremacy in education. And so that is why they're on two different sides, right? And those were the connections that I made this week. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to making some more connections. Take care.